see the screen, Vilma?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
the
That's amazing.
screen.
Like
Mm-hmm.
like Deb said, a workshop is different from a class. A class, the teacher assigns you homework and you do the homework, right? By yourself. We're gonna do it together.
Okay.
I know that a lot of you, when you apply for jobs in your country, you use your CV, right?
Yeah.
Very different in United States. Um, we in United States, jobs ask for your resume. So that's why we want to talk to you about what are some of the best things that you can do to write a resume. And to make job searching easier for you, two websites that you can upload your resume to is LinkedIn and Indeed. Have you heard of those websites?
Yes.
Good, good.
Yes.
Do you have an account open?
No.
No, it's okay. It's free. It's free to use both, so we want to take advantage of that. LinkedIn is like Facebook. The only difference is Facebook is for your family, your friends, your social media. LinkedIn is also social media, but it's a professional social media. It's a website for you to make networking and professional relationships with people who are in your career, or maybe not in your career, but your professional contacts. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So how many
So
of you-
Raul, maybe one of the things we can do later is to show them those websites.
Absolutely. How many of you have a CV right now? Lydia, are you saying
I have
yes?
a CV.
Yes? You have a CV?
CV is longer. Yes. It's
It's very long, right?
longer.
Yes.
Yes. Longer.
How
Yes.
many pages is the
100,
CV?
more than 2 pages. Yes,
More than-
or 3.
And then you notice that the CV goes into a lot more detail about your academics, your classes, studies, any awards, um, internships, anything that relates to the job or your educational background. That's why they can be very, very long, just like this example that I have for you here. Notice there's a lot of focus on her honors and her awards, a lot of education and training. Um, Not so much emphasis on her work experience. It's just it's her current position and the previous position. Is that sort of what your CV also looks like as well?
Yes.
And you too?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Deb, you have a resume.
I have always had a resume.
Me too. So for those of you coming from other countries to the U.S., it's this difficult transition to go from this type of document to this.
Yeah.
Whereas you see here, there's a lot more focus on there's an objective. A lot of jobs would prefer that you include an objective in your resume. Um, and I think that that stands out to managers even more if you have an objective versus if you don't have an objective. Um, you notice here that just in the body of the resume, there's a lot more focus on this person's professional experience. And on the side here, of course, you want to include your contact information, because if the manager wants to likes your resume and they want to offer you an opportunity for an interview, then of course they're going to either call you or email you. So you want to include your phone number and your email. I've noticed a trend lately that not everybody puts in their full address. I've noticed a lot of people just put the city and state. And maybe that's because they don't want to provide the full address until they've actually gotten the job. Does that seem right, Deb?
So a lot of times, especially when we're doing remote work, it's not as important. But the other reason is for security, so that you don't want your address to be out floating around, because a lot of times when you mail a resume, a lot of people see it and touch it. So you want to make sure that you're staying safe.
Miss Deborah, we don't have to write the address. We don't have to.
No, we don't have to write the address, but we have to make sure that there's a phone number and an email.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Phone number and email, for
Okay,
sure.
thank you.
One question that I got from a class recently was that in her country, it seems normal or the standard to include a picture in your resume.
Yeah.
Do any of you attach a picture to your resume as well?
No.
Here, no.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely don't want to include a picture because I think more often than not, they're going to research. They're going to do their own research on you to see, your online activity, and they'll probably look for you on Facebook, maybe LinkedIn. So I would not include the picture. But you definitely want to emphasize your skills. If you've noticed here, these are very important skills to have for any job. Adaptability, problem solving, collaboration, strong work ethic, time management, critical thinking. All of these are very good traits for you to have because that's what these managers are looking for you to have. And they'll probably ask you about some of these skills as you go through your interview. Education. You always want to start from the most current or most recent form of education and then go work your way back. But I think most people nowadays, it's okay if you just focus on the last two versus if you have, like in my case, I go from high school all the way through master's. As it relates to the job, maybe it's and in terms of spacing, would you guys say that it's probably better if you just focus on the last two, or should you include everything? Any thoughts, Anne or Deb?
Oh, I would say just the two highest. So in your case role, it would be your master's and your college, and you would not put your high school.
And definitely include a license or a certification if you have one. This is super important. It shows that you are very professional with the job or work that you're doing. Any license or certification that you have, whether it's here or your country, it's very good for you. But just as you look at this resume and interviews are.
Yes, Raul, I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, if I haven't a picture of my country work, can I put the picture of my certificate, job certificate in the resume?
Lydia, not a picture. You just tell them what the certificate is.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
You tell them that the name of the certificate and the place that you got it and when you got it, the date.
Yeah, okay, okay.
If
Thank
you
you.
have a copy of it, you can have one with you. But no picture.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have a question. License and certification means anything I have award, anything like award, like participate any workshop, something like that.
Yeah, like not so much an award, but there's some careers like nursing, for example. Nursing takes a lot of preparation. It takes a lot of classes, and so you often talk about how if I need to work in this particular job or field, you have to be certified, right? So that applies to nurses, that applies to teachers in the public school system, for example. I think for a teacher to teach at the college or university level, um, and tell me, or Deb, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think if you wanted to be a professor, you at the very minimum would need to have a master's or doctorate.
Generally, yes.
Whereas if you want to teach in the public school system, then you'd certainly need to be certified to teach in the public school system. So you'd have to pass the praxis test, and you'd have to pass, I don't know how, maybe it's changed, but I know at the very minimum, you have to pass one praxis and then maybe a second one to focus on which age group you want to teach. Make sense, Mimi?
Yes.
Everybody?
Yes.
Any license or certification, it has to do with the preparation that you've done to be certified to work in that field or area. Okay. As you look at this example resume right now, just think about, you're the manager, okay? And you look at how this resume is written. Does it grab your attention, or do you think it's too wordy, it's too long? And David?
I think it's not too long. I think, for example, a secretary or administrative assistant need to do many many
Tasks?
yes, many tasks.
Okay. Lydia, what about you?
Yes, for me it's not too long, but she put twice secretary 1 and secretary 2. I don't know why.
But different jobs.
Okay.
Different jobs. For this one, where it says the bottom one, Winfield and Winfield in Boston.
Okay.
This one, similar, same position, secretary, but the company is Bright Spot.
Okay, I see.
Mimi?
Yes, exactly. Not too long, not too short. Exactly where, exactly to words.
And your thoughts?
So it fit on a page, which I think is good. So I think one of the key things is you don't want to make it so long. If it fits nicely on a page, that's really good. And there are 3 jobs, and there are 4 or 5 points about each job. So you really do want to keep it concise and short, but this seems well written in that it brings out different points, which I can't see that anything's like not good, not important. They all do seem to be different points. So I think it's probably a very reasonable length. I don't think it wants to be any longer. There does come a point at which it becomes too long, but I think as long as you're not being repetitive, I actually quite like the length of this, and I think it brings out some good points, like when she says at the bottom, She organized a successful fundraiser, bringing over $20,000. So that kind of concrete figures, you know, this is my achievement too, is really good. So I just think it was well planned out with some good points and about as long as it needed to be.
Deb,
I think-
any feedback?
So for a resume, the maximum size should be 2 pages. No more than 2 pages. Not 3, not 4, not as long as your CV. Should be 2 pages.
Okay.
Okay, maximum, the most. And so I think that this person doesn't have a whole lot of experience yet because they've only had 3 jobs. So 1 page is sufficient, it's fine. If you had a lot more experience, you might go to the 2 pages. The other thing that I think is very important is that if you look at it, it's telling you when she worked at each job and what she did at the job. But it's not just that she did things, but it's telling also how she helped the company. So there's a difference between just saying, I did stuff, and like Anne was saying, that I was able to bring in a lot of money for my company when I did this job for the fundraiser, right? So when, for instance, I have my resume and I'm in financial positions, I have to say how the company was able to grow for all of the money that it was able to bring in because of the work that I did. Not just that I managed people, but that I was able to get results. And so that's always important in the resume. And the other piece that I think is very important, and Raul talked about these skills, the problem solving, adaptability, and all of its others. When you're talking about your job experience on the other side, you want to say how you used those skills in the jobs, because otherwise you could write anything, right? So you could write any skill at all in the world and everybody goes, yeah, how do we even know? Why should we believe you? So when you have the skills that are in the skills section, you want to talk about some of those skills in the experience section and when you're talking about the jobs. So that's my feedback, Raul.
Thank you, Deb. Lydia, is that your hand up or?
No.
Another thing I want to mention to you is that if you look at this sample resume, you notice that she never mentions I did this or I did that. This is a very professional document. So the sorry about it. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. You never want to mention I because that's not the professional thing to do. But the words, and when you write this resume, what you want to do is use as many strong verbs as you can. And you'll notice that she uses, for example, here in the first one, she uses trained, developed, maintain, manage. In the second job, she has open, distributed, maintained, streamlined, read and analyzed, developed, organized. This really grabs people's attention. Make sense?
Yes.
So you want to use really strong verbs to talk about your skills or your accomplishments.
So Raul, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So supposing that somebody has a resume and there are gaps. So for example, you know, they worked up until say May of 2019, and then they didn't have a job again until say August of 2019. How do they, should they put anything in the resume to explain why there's a gap? Or should they just leave it until maybe they get an interview? Or how do they handle gaps? Because I feel like some of our students will have gaps when they were maybe moving abroad or, you know, whatever.
That's a very good question. I'm not quite sure how to answer it. I, I feel like, if they ask why there is such a gap, I think you just have to be honest with them. But I don't know. Is there something else that you would recommend that they do?
So I was thinking if it was much of a gap. I mean, obviously, if it's just like a month or something, they were changing jobs. But I was thinking that potentially, if there's sort of a 3 to 6 month gap or longer, it might be wise to include, as the listing goes, took 6 months off to travel abroad, or something. I mean, I don't know if Deb, maybe you would know, but I was thinking about it, and I mean, I don't know for sure, but I was thinking it might look a bit odd, and it might be a bit off-putting if you just have a gap that's not explained when somebody's looking at your resume. Deb, do you know any better?
So I think there's two ways to go about that. So if it's just a month or two, then you don't necessarily need to put the months in that you worked at that job. You could put the years. And so it doesn't show right there. I think if you're taking a lot of time off for a specific reason, like to raise your family, you can say that. And you can possibly say that in your cover letter rather than your resume. And I think the other thing that you're seeing now up on Raul's screen is that you have a lot of things that are up front that talk about the qualifications as opposed to the jobs up front. And so how you lay out the resume becomes more important. So you would want to say, these are the things that I have that I can do, the skills, and then you put the experience underneath. And so that is not the first thing that everybody looks at.
Mm-hmm.
You will get asked about gaps. When I interview people, I ask them, why was there a gap? And sometimes, they just wanted to take time off. And sometimes they lost their jobs and it took them a while to get a new job. And if people are honest about some of those things, it helps in the interview.
Absolutely. And not everybody's going to write a resume the same way, because it also depends on what type of job you're applying for. Because if you look at this resume versus the last one, you see, this one is, you notice that she has administrative assistant under her name.
Yes.
She's looking, this is a resume catered towards an administrative assistant or secretary type job.
Mm-hmm.
The resume, I think this format fits that kind of job. Make sense? But the next one, this person's coming from he's applying for a totally different type of job. He's applying for film production, television, photography type jobs. So you can already notice the difference in the layout and the format of this resume. But it's also, well, I was going to say this one's only one page, but then if you notice at the very bottom, it says continued. So there could be 2 or 3 pages to this, but like Deb said, you want to, if you can fit the resume to 1 page, wonderful. But if you can't, and there's still a lot of additional experience and success to include in your resume, then you want to make sure you don't have more than 2, right?
Yes.
So can I say something about that?
Yes.
So if you have a lot of experience, the way to make it in 2 pages is you do more of the last jobs that you had, the most recent jobs, and then presumably the other jobs that you had very early on in your career are not as important anymore because you had them a long time ago. And so at that point, you don't need to explain a lot of things about those jobs. You just put what the title was and where it was, and maybe one or two, words or sentences. Okay, so somebody else is talking. But you don't put a lot of explanation. So if you looked at the things that are under this experience here for 2013 to 2015, there's a lot of words. There's a whole paragraph about what Janice did. But when it gets to 20 years ago, what she did in 1913 or 1983, sorry, or 1993, she's not going to put a lot of stuff there because it's not that important anymore. Because what I did 20 years ago is not why people would hire me.
Mhm.
So, my resume goes back a long time, but if you looked at my resume, you would see a lot right now, and then a lot in the last job that I had before this one, and then less and less and less for all those other jobs, because the most important thing is my last two jobs.
Anne, would you like to add anything?
I would say I agree. Again, I think it's very useful to think to yourself, what is the person that I'm hoping will hire me is going to be interested in? So, when you think about it from that point of view, I think it gives you a different way of looking at it. So, obviously they are much more interested in what you did recently than in what you did ages ago. So everything Deb said is I think absolutely correct. And do be just critical. You're not trying to cram as much into this as possible. You're trying to put as little as possible, but as fully as possible.
Absolutely.
So I think Anne makes a very good point. You have to know what's going to be important for this job. And you might have a different resume for a different job. So, if this person is going for film and television production, but she's also applying to be a store manager, she would put some different things for the store manager than what you're seeing in this resume, because some of the skills would be important, but the way that she puts them together for the person who's reading it should be different.
Mm-hmm. Does that make sense, everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. So here are your 5. It sounds so easy to say it, but it's difficult to practice. You want to keep the resume short. How many pages?
5.
No.
No,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so-
2 pages.
2 pages.
Two pages.
2 page.
I repeated this one. No, 2 pages.
Two.
Okay.
Oh,
And like Deb said, all of your experience is important, but perhaps the most important part of your experience is the most recent experience, because that's what people are interested in. They don't want to, maybe the work that you did 10 years ago is important to the job now, but they're probably more interested in what you did, last month or last year, however long you've had the current job before you apply. Make sense?
Yeah.
Definitely check your grammar and your spelling and your tenses. Sometimes when people are so nervous about applying for a job, they write the resume, they look through it really, really quickly, and they think, yeah, I think it's ready to go. They send it, but then they don't realize that they had a grammar mistake, there was a spelling mistake, or when it comes to talking about the work that you did in the past, sometimes people make the mistake of writing the resume within the present tense for the whole resume. and you don't want to do that. Whenever you talk about work that you did before, you have to talk about it in the past tense.
Yes.
Make sense?
Yes.
So I'm going to say something about this too.
Mhm.
And again, think about the person who's reading it. So if I read a resume that has some of these mistakes that Raul just talked about, I think this person isn't very careful. And they're not going to be very careful if I hire them to do my job.
Yes.
So I want somebody who is going to pay attention to getting things right.
Mhm.
Okay.
And don't use I. Okay? This
Yes.
organized, managed, developed, created, strong verbs, and that you don't have to use I for. Never use I. As soon as you see an I in your resume, delete it. Don't use I. Okay? You want it to look good, right? Easy to read, organized, because like Deb said, you want to think about who is reading my resume. Does it grab their attention? Does it look organized and clean to them? Do I have all the detail? Is it, is the grammar correct? Is the spelling correct? All of these details that make me think about these things as a manager, I'm also thinking about because I want them to look at my resume and say, yes, Mimi is a good person for this job. I can see she's professional in her writing and she's organized and she's detailed, etc., etc. Make sense?
And stay on time also. On time.
And maybe the most important thing, you want to be consistent. You don't want to change, like, let me go back here. You notice how this is pretty consistent, right? In this section, you notice every heading is bolded. The text is like normal, but then you have bullet points. Perhaps it would have been a good idea to bullet point here.
Mhm.
So he didn't do that, but you can see that this is bolded too to differentiate what each form of education he did. He goes from bullet points to, you notice how these are like hyphens.
Mhm.
I would say if you use bullet points, you want to use bullet points for everything. Use bullet points here, bullet points here, bullet points here, but she changed it to these lines. She does bold the headings, but you see how this is different. So as I'm looking at that, I'm saying, organized, but not fully organized. Make sense?
Yes.
So Raul, also let's talk for a minute about how to check your spelling and your grammar. So when you guys do something in the either Word or the Google Docs, there are options in there to check. You can do that inside of those programs, and you need to check those things. You need to review it in your program. And you also probably want somebody else to look at it.
Okay.
Proofread.
Yeah.
My mom always used to tell me, check your resume 5 times and then have somebody look at it too. As soon as somebody else looks at your resume, they can catch a mistake that maybe you didn't see.
Yeah.
Because you're so nervous trying to read it. It sounds good when you review it, but when you give it to somebody else, maybe they can tell you, oh, you missed a spelling mistake. You misspelled this, or you didn't bold this, or you didn't put the time that you spent at this job here, or it's written in the present tense, not the past tense. There's just so many things. Yeah, Anne, any thoughts on consistency?
So I agree. And bullet points I think are always particularly good. Like resumes do usually go with the bullet point option. That's just a good format that I think most people use these days. I was just going to point out, so, and Deb and Raul, stop me if I'm wrong here, but as Raul mentioned, your past job should always be in the past tense, but I think your present job should be in the present tense, right? So you got to be careful of that too. It's like the job that, if you're putting anything that is till the current day or till the present, that should be in the present tense. Everything else should be in the past tense. So just be aware those two things are different, right?
Yes.
So again, go back for just a minute, Raul. So the spelling and grammar errors. So you guys all did the resumes that you submitted to us in Google Docs. Under tools, there's something called spelling and grammar, and it will check it for you, and you should use those.
Mhm. And
Okay.
the good thing about Word and Google Docs is that if you make a grammar mistake, it automatically, if you've set it on, it will tell you you've made a grammar mistake or a spelling mistake. But still, you want to go back and review and proofread.
Yes. Okay, sorry.
I'm good.
I stopped you on that one.
And this one is just to make sure they know how many pages?
2 page.
2 pages.
5?
2
Yeah.
pages.
2 page.
5 pages.
2 page.
2 pages. Pages. How should your sentences be written?
What is the question?
How should
Please.
you write your sentences?
No,
Not very long.
not really.
Just like when you're doing the interview, when you give short, clear answers, short, clear
The
sentences,
point.
very short. If you remember, and Deb, Anne talked about this when we were talking about the resume. Remember this one?
Yeah.
Organized a successful fundraiser, bringing in over $20,000 for the community center. Whenever you can include that type of detail in your resume, you want to do that, because this is what grabs people's attention. If Deb, if you're the manager and if this is Anne's resume and you're reading that, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that she's going to help me make my company better. And that's important. Is remember what we talked about last time is when you're interviewing or when you're applying for a job, the manager doesn't care what you want. They want somebody who's going to help them do a better job. And so if you can show them that there's something that you've already done, that would mean that you could do it again for them. That's what's important. So when I'm hiring, I want somebody who can help me be successful. I want you to be successful too, but that's not my most important thing. Because a lot of people are going to apply for this job, right? So if a lot of people are applying for the job, I'm going to pick the person that I think is going to help me the most be successful.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so competitive.
Also, if I might say, I think the nice thing in this lady's resume was that, you know, there was something specific. So if an employer reads enough resumes, they're going to see over and over and over again the exact same generalities or general things. Like everybody is going to have, you know, problem solving abilities, good time management, you know. So if I've just read 20 resumes, the thing that I would remember from this resume is that this lady helped get $20,000 for the company. I mean, that's what I'm going to remember. I'm not going to remember she has good time management, she can problem solve, she's good as a team. That's all important, but the specific details might be what sticks in an employer's head. and marks you out from everybody else. So it's really important if you've done something that is maybe a little bit different or is a little bit important, you know, put the specifics, don't be vague, because the employer has to somehow pick you out from all the other people. Okay, so give them something to remember if you can. Like when I read this, that was what I remembered. Okay.
So there's one thing that crosses over between the resumes and the interviews, and what Anne just talked about is very important. A lot of times when we're helping people, we call them success stories. And it's very important for you to think about what your success stories are of where you've helped in the last job or in some of your volunteer experience, and be able to talk about that. And you probably want to write that down so that then you can put it in your resume, but you're also prepared to talk about it in your interview.
The best piece of advice that I ever got for my resume was that your resume has to show that you are an achiever and that you're not a doer. And at first I didn't understand what they meant, but then they told me, I'm not saying that you don't have good experience. You have wonderful experience. But when I read your resume, I'm not convinced that you can, like Deb said, that you can make my company successful because I'm not seeing what you can achieve with your job skills. Does that make sense?
Yes, makes sense.
When you see a job application, right, you see these bullet points about what the job requires you to do, right? You need to answer the phones, you need to talk to customers, et cetera, et cetera. But when you write your resume, you know, not everybody's going to be able to talk about how they raised over $20,000. But what I'm trying to say is you take those skills that you have of time management or collaboration, and you talk about what are some projects or some things that you did very, very well that management said to you, good job, Lydia. I really liked how you started this project and you grew it, and now it's better than what it was before. Those are the achievements that you want to talk about versus just writing with bullet points. I talk to customers. I I email 50 people a day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's what we mean by, you know, there's always going to be something that stands out to this manager because they're probably reading many resumes before they read yours. And a lot of people are going to be using these same skills. They're going to say, I have good time management. I work well with people. I'm a critical thinker. I'm a problem solver. But then there isn't something that you read on the resume that says, I organized a successful fundraiser and I brought in over $20,000.
So the other thing that you can do is you can talk about how you had some problems and how you fixed them. Or you can say, I worked on a fundraiser that didn't bring enough money in, and then I learned something from it. And so the next time I did better. So that you show that you have growth, that you learn things, and that you get better over time. So just saying I answered the phone, like Raul said, that everybody can answer the phone, right? But if you say, okay, I answered the phone and I solved this person's problem of why they called, that's different. That means that I did something really positive that I can talk about, and that my manager can go back and say, okay, if Mimi did that the last time, she can do it again. She can do it for my company.
Mhm.
So also I have another question. So if someone did some volunteer work while they were working, so for example, Babette was telling me last week, I think Babette, that you had worked in, so you had given some free medical help to people while you were working in a job. So so it seems to me that that's also a very important thing to include. Would you include that under your, as one of the things that you did while you were doing that job? So you would just include also, during that period, volunteered at the free clinic or whatever, or would you put that someplace else at the bottom?
I would have my own section for volunteer experience,
Okay.
since it's related to the job that you're doing, but you know what I mean? It's volunteering seems to be its own category. Am I right, Deb?
So on my resume, it does have a separate section for volunteer, and it has all of the work that I do with the Literacy Council.
Okay.
But if it's part of the experience that you have, so going back to what Anne was saying, like maybe you don't have a job, but you've been volunteering, you could put it in the experience section instead and say, this is work that I did as a volunteer, and these were some of the things that I accomplished with the bullet points. So I think it depends, again, on how complete your resume is. So if you were volunteering during one of those gaps where you didn't have a paid job, I would put it into experience.
Okay. And I do think it's an important thing to think about including, because again, you want to distinguish yourself from the crowd, and perhaps the fact that you had were doing some wonderful volunteer work, whatever it was, or community outreach or something like that, that's also another good thing for the employer to be talking to you about in your interview. And especially if you have, as we said a couple of weeks ago, you've done some research on a company you want to apply to. If they value community service, you absolutely definitely need to include it on your resume.
Mhm.
And I think, there's an opportunity, again, to show how you helped the
Yeah.
organization that you volunteered with. And so if you have that as experience, again, depending on if you're working at the same time, then you would put it in a separate section in volunteer, but you would put the same dates. You would still say, in this case, 2017 to the present. Or if you had, if this person had a gap and they worked from 2017 to 2019, but then 2019 to 2020, they're working as a volunteer, they could put it right under the experience and do the same thing and talk about all of the very important words, strong words that Raul talked about of what they've accomplished and how they help the organization.
Absolutely.